Okay, so today we're going deep on Brown's gas. Have you heard of this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. Used
Yeah.
for welding and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. But apparently there's this whole other side to it. Like some people think it could be like a health revolution or something.
Really? Like what do they say it does?
Well, we actually dug up all this stuff from a guy named George Wiseman. He calls himself a Brown's gas expert, and he's got lectures, Q&As, all sorts of stuff.
And what's his take?
He is all in on this stuff. Claims it can boost your energy, make your scars disappear even.
Scars disappear. That's a bit out there, isn't it?
It does sound pretty out there, I know.
No.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg with this Wiseman character. He's got some pretty interesting ideas.
Like what?
So he's adamant that Brown's gas is not just hydrogen, which is interesting because he talks about how our bodies are full of hydrogen.
Right.
But he says it's this unique mix of hydrogen and oxygen. Oh, and something he calls electrically expanded water, or EXW for short. Ever heard of that?
EXW.
Me neither. But apparently, this EXW is what Wiseman believes is the magic ingredient. It's like the secret sauce that makes Brown's gas so special.
And what is this EXW exactly?
He describes it as negatively charged plasma water, packed with electrons he claims are super important for healing. Oh, and get this, he says inhaling Brown's gas for like 12 seconds is like drinking a whole liter of hydrogen-rich water.
Hold on. Negatively charged plasma water. That sounds a little science fiction-y, even for me.
Right. It's a lot to unpack. So, to try and wrap our heads around this whole EXW thing, imagine taking water and like supercharging it, zapping it with electricity. That's kind of what Wiseman seems to be getting at, although even he admits that figuring out how to actually measure this EXW is proving to be a challenge.
Interesting. So how does he explain its supposed benefits if they can't even measure it properly?
Well, he draws a comparison to something called EZ water, which stands for exclusion zone water. It's a concept explored by Professor Gerald Pollack. From what I gather, EZ water is basically water in a specific state where it's more structured, more organized. Imagine like regular water is a jumbled mess,
Yeah.
but EZ water is like perfectly arranged, almost crystalline.
Okay, I kind of get it. But what does this easy water have to do with Brown's gas?
That's the thing. Wiseman is suggesting that Brown's gas somehow creates this super organized, easy water in your body. And that's what leads to all these supposed amazing health benefits.
Interesting. And he has evidence to support this?
Well, he did show a jar of water during his lecture that he claims he never washes, and it had visible stuff floating in it. And he claimed that this was proof that Brown's gas was transforming the water into what he calls easy gel. While Pollack's work is certainly interesting, there's no real consensus on easy water and its health benefits. So Wiseman is basically taking this new idea and saying Brown's gas amplifies it, creates this super hydrating, health-boosting wonder water. He starts talking about deuterium-depleted water, and even mentions something about Brown's gas causing transmutation.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it does feel like we stepped into an episode of Star Trek.
A bit, yeah. Even some of the people in his audience, like there was a chemist there, seemed a bit skeptical. They were asking some tough questions.
Which is good, right? We always want to hear from the skeptics. But despite this lack of, let's say, mainstream scientific backing, Wiseman is completely sold on Brown's gas. Paints Brown's gas as this revolutionary alternative. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we get totally caught up in the hype, we do need to address the elephant in the room. Or should we say the lie in the room? People have concerns about the safety of Brown's gas, right?
Right. There's that whole thing about lye being in Brown's gas.
Exactly. But Wiseman addresses this head on. Claims his machines produce pure Brown's gas, free of any nasty stuff. He even says he sent samples to labs for testing.
So he's trying to assure people that his Brown's gas is the good stuff, the pure stuff.
Oh, absolutely. He even went as far as to demonstrate inhaling the gas straight from his machine.
Now that's confidence for you.
Right. Although he does stress the importance of starting slow Jew, acknowledging that some people might get headaches or experience other reactions which he believes are just the body healing itself.
Interesting. It's like he's saying, don't worry if you feel a little off at first. It just means it's working.
And speaking of healing, Wiseman tells this funny story about how he was using an air gun with the wrong socket and ended up with a head injury. But here's the kicker. He uses this anecdote to illustrate the healing power of Brown's gas. Claims it made the scar from that incident practically disappear.
He's full of surprises, this Wiseman fellow. So he's not just a salesman, he's a believer.
Oh yeah. He claims he's been using Brown's gas himself, drinking the bubbled water since 2005, almost 20 years. And he says he hasn't been sick once since he started.
Not even a sniffle. That's quite the claim.
I know, right? He attributes this incredible health to drinking the water, and even more so to directly inhaling the gas, which he started doing in 2016. He says even his hair started growing back thicker and darker.
Sounds like he's found the fountain of youth powered by Brown's gas. But does he say how much Brown's gas he uses? I mean, inhaling it for 12 seconds doesn't sound like much.
Well, he does clarify that while he personally inhales the gas for something like 8 hours a day, often while he's working, he recommends starting slow and gradually increasing the dosage.
Which does seem like a responsible approach, especially since we don't have any long-term studies on the effects of inhaling Brown's gas just yet.
But it's important to remember that everyone is different. What works for one person might not work for another. And while Wiseman's eager to share his story, it's just that his experience, it's not exactly hard scientific evidence.
Right, we have to keep that in mind. So what other amazing things does Wiseman claim Brown's gas can do? He mentioned it can boost your energy and libido, even help with serious conditions like cancer.
Oh yeah, he did say all that. Let's start with his claims about energy levels. He believes that Brown's gas provides your body with a boost of readily available electrons, which in addition to aiding in healing, he says, can improve brain function and give you more energy. He even tells a story about an older gentleman at one of his lectures who went from being, in his words, zombie-like, to cracking jokes within minutes of inhaling Brown's gas.
Like some kind of cognitive jumpstart? Sounds impressive. But what about those other claims, like using Brown's gas with other therapies?
Yeah, some people in the audience were curious about that, like using it alongside hyperbaric oxygen therapy, for example. Like he talks about creating what he calls new water.
New water? What in the world is that? Is it like super water?
Well, according to Wiseman, new water has no memory and can be programmed for various purposes. He even hinted at it being used as fuel. He claims Brown's gas cleared up his psoriasis, his arthritis, even a heart murmur. The guy practically radiates Brown's gas-powered vitality.
And he attributes all these amazing results to drinking the bubbled water and to directly inhaling the gas. So with all this talk about Brown's gas, the big question remains, does it actually live up to the hype?
That's the million-dollar question. We've explored the science, or at least what we know of it, the claims, the anecdotes, even the business side of things. But what does it all mean for our listeners? Is Brown's gas this revolutionary health solution? Or is it just another example of wishful thinking?
That's for them to decide. We've presented the information, but it's up to each individual to weigh the evidence. Maybe do some additional research, talk to their doctor, and come to their own conclusions.
And we would never want to steer them wrong. And part of that is understanding that there are no guarantees.
Right. Wiseman might be convinced that Brown's gas is a miracle cure, but it's essential to approach these things with a healthy dose of caution.
Couldn't agree more. So to sum it all up, what are some key takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with? We've covered a lot of ground here.
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that George Wiseman is clearly very passionate about Brown's gas. He genuinely believes in its potential to revolutionize health and wellness. And he's put a lot of time, energy, and money into developing his technology.
He's definitely not lacking in enthusiasm, that's for sure.
Exactly. However, enthusiasm alone isn't enough. We have to be able to separate the hype from the evidence. And while Wiseman provides some interesting anecdotes and makes some bold claims, there's still a lot we don't know about Brown's gas and its long-term effects.
It does seem like we're left with more questions than answers. On the one hand, we have Wiseman, who's this incredibly passionate advocate for Brown's gas, sharing all these amazing stories and bold claims.
And on the other hand, we're still waiting for that solid scientific evidence to back it all up. That's the tricky part with all of this.
It is, and it's easy to get swept up in the excitement, especially when you hear about people like Wiseman having such positive experiences.
It's important to remember that those are just that individual experiences. They might not be representative of everyone.
Right, like you were saying before, what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And without rigorous scientific studies, it's almost impossible to say for sure what role, if any, Brown's gas played in those outcomes.
So it really comes down to being a savvy consumer, doing your own research.
Ask questions, think critically, and seek out evidence-based information.
And Wiseman does encourage people to do their own research, and one that should be made with careful consideration and ideally in consultation with a healthcare professional.
Couldn't agree more. It's your health, your body. You get to decide what you do with it.
Well said. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Brown's gas, what are your final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the main takeaway here is to be informed. Be an educated consumer, especially when it comes to your well-being. Don't be afraid to question things, to dig deeper, and to seek out evidence-based information.
It's all about finding that balance between being open to new possibilities and being grounded in solid evidence. And of course, consulting with qualified healthcare professionals who can offer personalized advice.
Exactly. It's about making informed decisions about your health and well-being.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and often perplexing world of Brown's gas.
It's been a wild ride.
It has. Until next time, keep those minds curious, but always stay skeptical.